Shipping to the UK, the EU, you might have heard of VAT and EORI or EORI. So what are they? Why do they matter? And what do you really need to know in order to ship over there? So we brought on an expert, Chris Matthews, the partnerships manager at Zatu Games. He knows a lot about how you can handle order fulfillment across the pond, and he spends his days helping out Kickstarter creators do exactly that. We'll cut to the interview in just a minute, but real quick, my name is Brandon. This video is brought to you by Fulfillrite. We ship orders for e-commerce and crowdfunding. Link below for more information. Quotes are always free. Now, one last quick note, we edited this one with a light touch because we wanted to keep it lo-fi and simple and honest, just like a couple of professionals on a Zoom call, because that's what it is. All right, let's cut to the interview. So I guess I'll hop right in with the question that you probably get a ton, especially for folks who are shipping internationally. What is VAT, and when does it apply to UK shipments?
Absolutely. I mean, yep, it's a common question we hear all the time. What is VAT? When does it apply? Why do I have to pay it? I'm not even in the UK. In terms of the easiest way to understand, it's a sales tax. So when you sell to a UK consumer, the UK government will collect VAT on that sale. Depending on the item, that can either be 20% or 0%. So we have what's called a reduced rate. It will apply on every single sale. It'll either have full VAT, so at 20%, or zero VAT. And yeah, there's no way of getting around it. It is always on every sale of an item to a UK consumer.
Of course, cutting it down to 0% is quite a reduction in the sales tax, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I'm sure there are plenty of people in the US that wish the tariffs could cut down to 0% right now. There are very few products that it affects. It's what the UK government will class it as essential products. So you have books is the big one that kind of a lot of people utilize. You also have food items, things like children's clothes as well. Adult clothes are not VAT exempt, but children's clothes are. But there's a big list on the gov.uk website. If it's a great resource to use in terms of figuring out what rate of VAT you should charge on an item.
Mm-hmm. And so they probably just apply the VAT to every item, even if no funds are transferred at all for reporting purposes, it sounds like.
So, yes, there should always be a transfer of funds, but ultimately, as a seller of an item, so kind of a middleman, I guess, VAT should always be neutral for you. So if you sell an item valued at £10 and there's £2 of VAT, it will come to £12 total in the basket. You'll collect that from the customer. You'll keep the £10 because that's the money you've made from the sale, and the £2 in VAT will then be transferred to the UK government. So you won't be out of pocket for VAT, but there will still be kind of a transfer of funds. You'll essentially act as a middleman in collecting that sales VAT and then passing it on to the UK government.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and that makes sense because compliance is probably a big part of this. And so that kind of leads me to my next question, which is, and I'm sure you get this one all the time too, what's an EORI number and why do you need one?
Yeah, absolutely. So an EORI number, or EORI, as you sometimes hear it referred to, is a number specific for import. So if you're looking to get goods into the UK to be able to store in a UK warehouse, ship from the UK warehouse to consumers, you'll need an EORI number or an EORI number. It comes along with a VAT application, so you'll need a VAT number and then an EORI number as well. They're kind of two separate numbers. Usually, if you have a VAT number, an EORI number is kind of 3 zeros bolted onto that VAT number, so it's fairly straightforward. However, you can have an EORI number before you have a VAT number, so sometimes it might be different to begin with, but that's a kind of a little bit of an intricacy, I guess, is probably rarer. Yeah,
Right.
a rarer situation.
So I'm actually gonna like shift the order of the questions I was gonna ask just a little bit,
Absolutely.
because that kind of leads me to another question that was on my mind, which is how do you actually get this number? How do you get the EORI number, and how long does that process usually take?
So it's worth remembering that an EORI number is just for the import. That doesn't cover you for your UK VAT obligations. Um, the EORI number is just so you can get goods into the UK. I mean, you'll be happy to know that an EORI number application takes roughly 10 to 15 minutes, and you'll have a response back usually within a day. So if you are trying to get goods into the UK, that can be done super quickly, and it can be sorted, yeah, pretty much instantaneously. Once you know you need it, you can make that application, get a response back from HMRC, who are the UK body for tax, revenue and tax, I should say, and yeah, that's all well and good. However, a VAT application, so what you need to sell to UK consumers, can take a little bit longer. So the current wait time at the moment is between 2 to 4 months. So once you make that application, you then have to wait, yeah, 2 to 4 months before you can before you've got that number. That doesn't mean you can't sell, but yeah, perhaps something to consider when thinking about selling into the UK.
Okay, so basically, you need two separate numbers. Is that right? You need the
Exactly.
EORI
Yeah.
and you need the VAT. Okay,
Yeah.
and anybody who is importing goods into the UK with the intent to sell needs to have both of them in order to do that legally.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in terms of selling to UK consumers, you will need a VAT number to be able to collect VAT and then submit it to the UK government, and you'll need a EORI to actually get the goods into the UK. So, yeah, ultimately both numbers are necessary. For example, if you want to sell on Amazon UK, Amazon have an obligation for you to have a UK VAT number. You can't have a Seller Central account. You can't sell on Amazon without a UK VAT number.
Okay, that makes sense. And I know that there are certain things like that you also have in order to sell in the US. Like they want some amount of tax information. I'm not sure off the top of my head what it is, but
Mm.
it's all just really normal. They need to have that information in order for you to be able to sell into the market. And
Yeah.
it's been that way for years. This is not a recent thing either.
Yeah, from what I see, that the sales tax in the US is very different state to state. And in the UK, there's just one blanket rule for kind of the whole country. We have a similar system to Canada, so people selling in Canada will be familiar with Canadian sales tax. Yeah, you've got a similar system. I don't know the intricacies of Canadian sales tax, so I can't say if it's exactly the same, um, but it's more similar than the US for sure.
Okay.
Um, in terms of the import, though, that is, I think, you have to have an importer number in the US, I believe, or the import regulations, I think, are quite similar, for sure.
Yeah, to use an analogy for the US, for people listening from the US, you make an interesting point with sales tax because we're used to paying essentially two kinds of taxes, or at least this is what people think about the most. There's other stuff that people don't think about as much. There's the income tax that you pay on your form, and that little bits of it come out of your paycheck to pay that. Um, and then there's sales tax, which is like you buy the thing for $1, you pay $1.09 or $1.10 in the at least in the state of Tennessee where the sales tax is very high, but that's because you don't pay it to the state. So like VAT and similar things like GST, which I think is either used in Canada or Australia or both,
Yeah.
it seems functionally like sales tax with the exception of it being countrywide, and it's something that's handled by the seller. It's not something that the actual like buyer typically thinks about all that much. I guess unless it's pointed out in something like a pledge manager. But like you go into the shop, if it's my understanding that if it says it's £1.50, then it's £1.50. It's not like £1.65 or something.
No, that's exactly it. That's a big difference that we see quite often when you sell on. e-commerce platforms in the UK, people expect the price they see to be including taxes, not including shipping, but kind of including everything that they should pay pre that. The only exception, like you mentioned, is Kickstarters and pledge managers. So because in a Kickstarter, you could be selling to someone in the US, you could be selling to someone in the UK, you could be selling to someone in Canada. There will always be some of those regions where the taxes apply, and there'll be regions where they don't. So you can't cover everything in the Kickstarter. Otherwise, you'd have this wild imbalance of kind of profits and costs and all kinds of stuff. And in some of European countries, the VAT rate is 27%. So if you said, oh, all taxes are included in our Kickstarter price, and you charge $10 for an item, you suddenly lost $2.70 of that straight away to VAT. Well, for most publishers, that eats massively into your profit, and you possibly wouldn't make a profit on it, compared to selling something for $10 in the States, and you get the full $10. Don't get me wrong, they'll have to then pay for manufacturing and kind of all the other elements that goes into making the game, but it doesn't come off your bottom line in the same way that VAT would. Hence why publishers now use kind of a pledge manager. They say this is the price of the product, and then any shipping and taxes will be charged after the campaign. So that then they can go, okay, you live in the UK, excellent, 20%. You live in Hungary, it's going to be 27%. I think backers are used to that. It's just then being set up to be able to handle it, and having a fulfillment partner that can handle it. Don't get me wrong, there are lots of ways that the people talk about handling VAT. If you ship within the UK, you have to have a VAT number.
Yeah. And it seems like, so of course Kickstarter, since its inception in 2009, people have essentially started using pledge managers, BackerKit, GameFound, etc. to deal with all this stuff, because it's complicated. Not only the postage, but also the VAT. What I think is really interesting is Kickstarter is very actively taking those functions, and they're starting to make them native to the platform. Yeah. And they might, they've already announced this on their blog, but they might have that rolled out by the time this video drops even. So we might actually get to a situation where this is a thing that is just collected in Kickstarter and any other pledge managers you use. And it's just like the administrative part would be a lot easier, but you would still have to go get those numbers and generally have an awareness of what it is so that you can communicate to the backers. What you see might have a 27% charge on top of it if you happen to live in these countries.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And hopefully, if Kickstarter can implement that, I know GameFound do already, and BackerKit, I think, are looking at how they can do it in their kind of crowdfunding platforms. But if they can implement it so that the VAT is then added at checkout, so when you pledge and then you check out, it'll make things so much smoother in terms of a one-time payment. The only thing that I can see with that is that often publishers do not want to charge shipping at the point of pledging, because you don't know what's going to happen with global shipping rates in terms of freight, in terms of other items. So I think to some extent there will always be a form of pledge manager around, whether it be native to the platform and just a payment is taken later through Kickstarter, or whether it be a separate pledge manager such as BackerKit, like you mentioned, or GameFound. It's often necessary to make that call later in the game, after you've done all the production, after you've done all the manufacturing, and okay, freight from China to the UK is going to cost me this much money. Freight from China to the US is going to cost me this much money. Final mile shipping is going to be this. I know exactly what everything is. I know the weights. I know the dimensions. I know volumetric costs. I know all of the things that you talk about in your blog that you have to prepare for. I know I've done it all. At that point, I can charge for shipping, and I think that's why I think that they'll stick with these. That these pledge managers will stick around for a bit longer for sure. Because you're not buying a product there and then. You're almost pre-ordering.
Right. Yeah, the system's not going to go away. It might just change whether you do it on the platform or not. But
Mm.
like to your point, this is not something anybody could have really anticipated in '09 when the original infrastructure was built. But that gap between actually making that first purchase and then shipping it out, stuff changes. I mean, like in 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, inflation was like 1%.
Yeah.
Right. And shipping rates barely moved. And if they did, it didn't move by enough to matter. But now that things are different between like we've had spells of inflation touching double digits in the US, like very, very close to it, but not quite getting there. More in other places, as I understand it. And of course, shipping rate volatility and freight volatility from everything from like pandemic to boats getting stuck in canals to droughts to tariffs, etc. All of a sudden, we're finding out like, oh
Pirates.
yeah, actually, yeah, yeah, pirates, like actual literal pirates exist as a thing, and it's not the kids' book stuff. It's like it's a pretty serious issue,
Yes.
and yeah, all of a sudden we figure out, oh, we actually do need an entire other kind of software to handle this. Yeah, but anyway, I guess back on topic a little bit. So, are there thresholds under which the with the price of the good where you don't actually have to charge VAT?
Yeah. I think we talked about this previously with shipping from the UK to the US in terms of de minimis. You might be better placed to answer me in terms to answer this question in terms of instead of me, because obviously we ship mostly from the UK outwards rather than inwards. However, what I can talk about is shipping from the UK to EU, which is often quite appealing. Um, a lot of people look at kind of their warehousing situation and think, I could have a warehouse in Europe, I could have a warehouse in the UK. Um, do I want both? Do I want just one? Um, and there are ways of shipping between the two where it's customs friendly. As I'm sure there is shipping from the US to the UK as well. There's kind of customs friendly option under a certain value. I think it's £135, but I'm not 100%. It definitely is in the EU. So EU to UK under £135 in value. You can ship customs friendly, and you can kind of sort it all out so that it essentially goes through a system. UK to the EU, it's very similar. €150 in value. You can ship on what's called the IOSS scheme. So that's a scheme set up by the European Union, so that you can ship low value items and prepay the VAT kind of on a. Well, I say prepay. You pay it on a monthly basis. So you have what's called your IOSS return, where you have to declare, okay, you sent these 25 orders into all these different countries into the EU. This is the total VAT amount. This needs to be paid, and then once it gets paid to the IOSS system, it gets split across the governments. It gets split to the kind of correct tax bodies in each destination country. But yeah, I've got a little bit off topic on there because we've talked a lot about UK VAT, and yeah, it's worth mentioning about EU VAT because they often get bundled together, but they are a little bit of a different beast.
So it's interesting because a lot of people, they think UK VAT EORI IOSS, and it's all that just like at least from the American perspective, and probably also in places like Australia, Canada. It's all kind of this nebulous bundle of what do I need to do to ship to that part of the world, right?
Yeah.
It's just like what numbers do I need and what forms do I have to fill out and all that stuff. Now, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but IOSS includes the UK, right? Is that right?
So you can ship into the UK from the EU, and it's on a different system. But once again, I'm not the expert on those items because we obviously ship a lot out of the UK into the EU. So yeah, it's a similar system where it can be sent in and the VAT can be paid to the UK government. I don't know exactly how it works. I've never signed up for it. And a lot of our partners, if they are warehousing with us, we obviously don't ship into the UK very often via from the EU, especially not small shipments. It'll be kind of larger shipments where the de minimis wouldn't come into it. So IOSS, from our point of view, affects our shipments that go out into the EU. and having an IOSS number in a shipment that's under 150 euros essentially helps the shipment get their duties paid, customs friendly, whatever term you want for describing that. It's then reported monthly on an IOS report and paid into the European Union accordingly. So you still have to collect those taxes and you still have to pay it to the European Union. You just don't get it's net neutral, I guess, again in terms of the costs. Now, shipping anything over 150 euros, you cannot use the IOS scheme. It's very very strict on it. You can't go, oh, it's only 151 euros. I wonder if it'll go through. It won't. It will bounce straight back. They will. They have a very strict cutoff. If there are shipments that are going into the EU, and it's the same coming to the UK, you can use couriers such as DPD, FedEx, UPS, and you can prepay the taxes, so that it still gets their duties friendly. Or you cannot prepay the taxes, and it lands with the customer, and the final customer will get essentially a bill come through the post saying, we have this parcel, it's been sent by this person, you owe this much in tax, plus an administration fee. So you will get hit with, depending on the courier, 5 to 15 euros of tax, or in the UK, 5 to 15 pounds. It does depend on the carrier as to their administration charge, really. But yeah, so there are ways to do it over that threshold as well. It doesn't all have to be, once it gets past that point, once it gets past 150 euros in value, you don't have to go, oh, well, that's it, I can't send it, duties paid. You can, and there are options.
So it sounds like people who want to ship to the UK and EU both at the same time have a number of different options they can go with, and all of them could potentially be good depending on your circumstance, but
exactly,
it depends on the break. So it's like you could have separate warehouses in the UK and EU, and if you had enough order volume, there's nothing stopping you from doing that, really.
Yeah.
If you can afford all the pick and pack, and some people can, for big enough projects.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
But also, you could have it in the UK and you could send it into the EU via IOSS and have your 3PL help you with that, or vice versa. You could have an EU-based fulfillment center and then send it to the UK, duties paid if needed. If you have, like, I don't know, 500 European orders, but like 20 going to the UK, you might say, all right,
exactly,
no point in having a warehouse there. I'll just ship it out of the Netherlands or something.
And interestingly, if you decide to do one way or the other, if you decide to have both warehouses, you'll need both VAT numbers. So let's say you have a German fulfillment hub and you have a UK fulfillment hub. You will need both a UK VAT number and a German VAT number. However, if you decide to, okay, I'm going to ship my stock to the UK and have the guys in the UK send all of my parcels into Germany, France, into the European Union, you only need that UK VAT number because you're only importing into the UK, and then the IOSS essentially covers those shipments into the EU, and vice versa. So if you had, like you say, 500 German orders and 20 in the UK, you could send it all into Germany. You'd have to have a German VAT number and EORI number, and then once you've sorted that, you could then ship the goods into the European Union, or into the EU, sorry. And it would be, you could do it duties paid without a VAT number, because now this is a technicality in terms of when you do and don't need a VAT number in both scenarios. If the origin of the shipment is outside of the destination country, then you can prepay the taxes with either with the courier or via the IOSS system, and ultimately you don't. This is the only instance where you can sell to a UK or EU consumer and you don't need a VAT number to be able to sell to a consumer in that country. I don't know if that fully makes sense, but essentially, for example, let's take one of our clients who wants to ship to Germany. We wouldn't say, okay, we've got to check that you have a German VAT number. We'd say, okay, we need an IOSS number. we ship it into Germany, and it goes on the IOSS scheme. So they don't need a German VAT number. They do need a UK VAT number. Does that make sense?
It honestly might make sense to me once I play this back and kind of parse through the logic more closely, because I take it on faith that your explanation is probably a good one because you've dealt with this.
We'll we've done plenty of shipments,
Yeah.
but it's a complicated business tax. So trying to explain it in, I guess, easy terms is ultra important. Sometimes you can't explain it in easy terms, and that's why you have VAT advisors and things like that. I mean,
Right.
I'll say this now, and I probably should have said it at the start, but I'm not a qualified accountant. We have qualified accountants in our company, and one of them is a VAT agent. It's the reason that we have a VAT agent in Zatu Fulfillment is because you need someone sometimes to go, okay, this is really complicated. I want you to do this for me, essentially, or show me how to do this.
And for a creator, that might be the most important thing to take away is that you should try to be familiar with these subjects because if you generally understand why you need an EORI number and what VAT is and GST and that stuff and the broad concepts of customs clearance and freight brokerage, you will at least be able to talk to experts and make sure that you're getting a good deal. But beyond that, it really does kind of just make sense to let experts handle this because it's just not reasonable to become an expert in 20 something different countries and their various trade policies and tax policies and that sort of thing. One more note, this is just something I noticed as you were describing it. It seems like IOSS was intended to prevent like a nightmare scenario where you have to register for like 27 different VAT numbers.
Yep.
I think it'd be 27 different VAT numbers if you shipped out to every country in the EU, and then 28 make it the UK as well. Um, that sounds terrible. So no wonder there's this one system for that.
That's it. Yeah. Within the EU, it's just OSS.
Okay.
So it's the one-stop shop.
Okay.
But from the UK to the EU, it's IOSS.
Okay.
So yeah, it's essentially a system put in place. So exactly as you said, you don't have to register in 27 different, 28 different
Yeah.
countries, which I'm sure there are a lot of creators who are wiping sweat off their brow now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like large businesses in the US kind of have a problem like that. This is not small business, mind you, but every state, 50 little laboratories of democracy, we've got different rules on when you have to remit taxes. And some of them are like you only have to do returns if it's 100,000 or more. And a lot of them, depending on what you're selling, you might not even actually have to pay anything. You just have to notify them that you're collecting revenue from their from the states. But everyone's threshold is different. Everyone's rate is different. What is taxable is considered different. So large companies end up having to pull in software like Avalara and TaxJar to just handle this for them, and then remit taxes to these states where it is required, and it'll just collect it at point of sale. And again, this is not something you've got to worry about if you were doing 500,000 in sales a year or a million. Probably, I mean, unless you're really concentrated in certain states, probably you just register with your own state and you're fine. But once you start getting over that 7-digit sum in revenues, then you really got to start thinking about that stuff. But Europe, on the other hand, and the UK working together have kind of figured out a way to get around that.
I think that's the main takeaway from this is, yeah, like you say, you can, as long as you've got an understanding of it, registering for VAT, you can do it yourself. It's free of charge. VAT shouldn't cost you anything if you do it all yourself. Ultimately, it's then a call. It's a call of, right, how much time do I have, and how much time do I want to spend spending on doing taxes. Whether it's UK taxes, whether it's US taxes, I don't know. And do I want to bring someone in to help me with that? Whether it because it will come at a cost, it's whether that cost is worthwhile, I guess.
Right. And participation is mandatory, right? Like it won't clear customs unless you do this. Is that right?
If you don't have VAT in the UK, the fulfillment hub that you are using has an obligation to report you essentially to the tax authorities in the UK. So it can be pretty damning in terms of a small business, even large businesses. If you don't have a VAT number and you're shipping within the UK, your fulfillment hub has an obligation. If they don't adhere to that obligation and report you, then they can be subject to fines themselves and will ultimately pass those on to you. So it's to give you a little bit of an idea. The fine for not reporting someone that you think is or a client that is not VAT registered who is selling in the UK is £3,000 per time. So adds up quite quickly, as you can imagine. If you think they've contravened the rules one time and then one sale, 3,000. Very quickly adds up.
Yeah, and even if you manage to wiggle your way out of actually paying that bill, it's like you're not going to be allowed to continue to sell within the country if you don't do that.
Nope, exactly that. You pretty much put a block on selling. The fulfillment hub won't sell for you anymore, or won't send any goods for you anymore. So you've lost any stock that you probably had, if that is the case. Your stock can be seized by HMRC. There's a big list of bad things that can happen, to put it bluntly. It's not ideal.
Yeah, so definitely get the numbers. You cannot avoid this. Thanks for watching this video. I appreciate it, and I know that Chris does too. Details on both of our companies can be found right there below in the description, and just in case you missed the name, my name is Brandon. I'm here on behalf of Fulfillrite. If you need help shipping orders for your crowdfunding campaign or e-commerce company, go to fulfillrite.com and request a quote. We've shipped for thousands of companies like yours, and we would be happy to help you too. The quote won't cost you a thing, so if absolutely nothing else, you will get some good information on pricing, which is always helpful. Link in the description. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Don't forget to slap some postage on that bell so that we can express ship new videos to you as soon as they drop. And last but not least, if you have any questions, please leave a comment down below. I will personally answer as many of them as I can. Thanks for watching.